Welcome to our Shotsuki Hoyo monthly memorial and adult Dharma service. I'd like to begin by reading the names of those who've passed away in the month of June. Jimmy Akaba, Stanley Aochi, Yasukichi Aochi, Nobuko Yoshida Coleman, Hisai Deguchi, Haruno Egashiro, Yasaburo Egashiro, Norma Sutton Fujikawa, Melody Fujimori, Higashi Fukawa, Matsu Fukuchi, Kanai Fukutomi, Takeshi Furuta, Peng Qian Go, Masai Goto, Satoru Harada, Natsuko Harano, Kameo Hatakeyama, Harriet Hayashida, Yoshiko Hiyama, Kyoko Hori, Mitsue Hurlbert, Shintaro Imazu, Takeo Inoue, Akio Isono, Kaz Izumi, Toshiko Kamada, Evelyn Kanada, Masai Kanagaki, Tsugio Kato, Henry Kawai, Ruby Kawamoto, George Kido, Take Kido, Mitsunori Komure, Mitsuru Kurotori, Takeshi Kusano, Mitsugi Maneki, Dorothy Matsui, Tsunejiro Matsutani, Yoshiharu Matsutani, Harue Minamoto, Misao Miyamoto, Tomie Miyamoto, Tama Miyazaki, Hatsue Mori, Katsuko Mori, Kinue Mori, Shoroku Morikawa, Tane Morikawa, Bert Morinaka, Kinuko Morinaka, Genkichi Mukuno, Riki Nagaki, Aki Naito, Saki Nakagawa, Sakai Nakaguma, Hanako Nakamura, Don Nakano, Janice Nakao, Shoichi Nakao, Tami Nakao, Juhei Nakashima, Juso Nakashima, Sakai Nakazono, Brian Neishi, Julia Neishi, Kikuyo Neishi, Michiko Neishi, Suzanne Neishi, Sai Nishimura, Kyuji Obayashi, George Ochikubo, Suga Ogawa, Asai Okai, Yunosuke Okai, Richard Okano, Ken Okamura, Suehachi Omura, Noboru Ono, Rose Ono, Karen Otsuka, Kazuyo Sakai, Sanemon Sasajima, Nobuyuki Sasaki, Miyoko Satake, Tomie Satake, Kenji Sato, Bunjiro Shigematsu, Risuke Shiozaki, Kikue Suda, Koto Suyama, Noboru Takagaki, George Tomori, Sada Tanabe, Nancy Tanaka, Hisayo Taniguchi, Kiyoshi Taniguchi, Ben Tanisawa, Tome Tanisawa, Tomoe Tatai, Yaeko Teramae, Itsue Tsuchida, Harold Tsujimoto, Kiku Tsushima, Kimiko Tsushima, Kumaichi Tsushima, Teruko Tsutakawa, Benjamin Wakabayashi, Hakuzo Watanabe, Takeo Yago, Fukutaro Yamamoto, Hamako Yamanashi, Koraku Yamane, Roy Yamane, Yoshio Yamato, Matsutaro Yamashita, Hatsutaro Yoshisato, Kumekichi Yoshiura. Next, we will have Sutra chanting, and we'll chant Shoshinge, which is composed by Shinran Shonin, and that's on page 79 in the BCA service book with the purple cover. You can also find it on the BCO webpage, and you can chant along, or you can think about your loved ones that are being honored during the chanting. Namandam, namandam, namandam. Kimyo Munyo Junyo Rai Namo Fukashi Giko Hozo Bosatsu Niji Zai Seiji Zai Obusho Token Shobutsu Jodoin Kokudo Ninden Shizen Mak Konyu Mujo Shushoga Chohotsuke Udai Guze Goko Shiyui Shishoju Jusei Myo Shomon Jippo Fuho Munyo Muhenko Muge Mutai Koen no Shoujo Kangi Chieko 不断難事務所校超日学校精進説一切群上無交渉本願名号症状語死神信行願人上等学初代涅槃必死滅度願成就如来所以公主世唯説弥陀本願会五辱悪事群上会お信如来如実言納発一年期愛心不断煩悩特涅槃凡上逆法再縁入如種子入会一味摂取信仰上昇語意の水波無明暗頓内心臓死運無上不真実真人天非如日光不運無運無資源妙無暗逆心謙虚大狂気即応超絶語悪種一切全幕本部人門心如来偶然願仏言古代小下者善人妙分打理家弥陀仏本願念仏邪見狂慢悪衆生信行十字人に南南中死南昔インド祭天使論下中華自治域思考層現代諸公聖書意妙如来本税要記釈迦如来両合戦一種五妙難天竺龍樹大自主とせ質の財派有無権先絶大乗無情報召喚議事小安楽賢治難行六六信行異行指導楽億年弥陀仏本願自念即自入必上唯の上昇如来語お法大偶然四天神菩薩増論説奇妙無下光如来永主たら見真実光線王朝大聖願こういう本願力へこ移動群上昇一心記入功徳大崩壊筆逆入大へ収集徳試練下造世界即昇進用法精進有本の人間人図入生寺音寺を下本師ど南陽天使上皇蘭消防殺来三蔵ルシ十上教凡上専業気楽法天神菩薩論中下報道因果見性願応言根高ゆたり症状死因唯新人惑前本部新人没 承知生じ即涅槃必死無量光明道小主上回復家同社結晶道難所唯名浄土活入万全自力変言種円満特語感染症三不三神経音言増末放滅道品一生増悪地偶税死安女害称名化全道独名武将位公愛上三女逆悪公明明語権人年海入本願大地界行者少女今後心狂気知念相互用意大と逆三人即小法小子上楽原神公開一大教変気安女間一切先祖出身反先人法華二度小弁入極重悪人有小物が薬剤非摂取中煩悩証言水不見大無見上昇が本資源空明仏教連民全幕本部人新宗教諸公編集戦弱本願具悪性現内生自人連下決知義上位少子即入弱上無意楽必知信じにの入愚教大自主死と上際無変極上悪同族自主愚道心有意化心心高層説平等性際道本大心往生安楽南無阿弥陀仏南無阿弥陀仏南無阿弥陀仏南万だ南万だ南万だ
Now I'd like to deliver the Dharma message for our Shotsuki Hoyo monthly memorial and adult Dharma service. I've recently been reading fiction again. I haven't in a long time, but I started again. I think last month I talked about Octavia Butler, the parable of the sower and parable of the talents. Incredible book, but kind of difficult, emotionally difficult to read. After that, I read Lord of the Flies. I never read that before. Pretty intense book. That's an intense emotional book too, but it was definitely worth reading. Now I'm reading something a little bit lighter, The Neverending Story. There was a movie about it in the 80s, right? It had I never saw it as a kid. I was living in Japan. I only knew the, to me, kind of annoying theme song by Lamal. Actually, Giorgio Moroder apparently wrote it. He's kind of disco electronic music king, so it's interesting to listen to now, but at the time I really didn't listen. So we watched the movie again, and I saw it as an adult, and it's okay. Reading the book, I'm enjoying the book more. The book has more detail, and there's parts missing from the movie that make more sense when you read the book, so that's one thing to be aware of. And that made me think there's a character called the Childlike Empress. She's not in the movie a lot or in the story a lot, but she's the whole point of the story because she's sick. And Fantastica, right? This world, they call it Fantasia in the movie, but in the book it's called Fantastica. There's something wrong. Fantastica is being gobbled up by this nothingness, and she's ill. There's a great section that talks about all these doctors that come to try and diagnose her and heal her. And it lists, and it's fantasy, right? So it's kind of like Lord of the Rings in a way, right? And there are these different kingdoms, maybe we could call them provinces, inhabited by various creatures. Unicorns, imps, will-o'-the-wisps, rock eaters, all these different kind of characters. And then it mentions witches, vampires, and ghosts. And it says, none of those are generally reputed to be especially benevolent or conducive to good health, right? So they're doctors, but they're witch doctors, vampire doctors, ghost doctors, right? But then it says, to understand why they're present, there's one thing you have to know. And then it talks about the childlike empress. This isn't in the movie, but this is the part that struck me. In her eyes, all her subjects were equal. It's just one line in a much longer description, but that really hit me. She never had to defend herself against an assailant, for no one would have thought of rebelling against her, of harming her in any way, because of this. And then it says, every creature, whether good or bad, beautiful or ugly, merry or solemn, foolish or wise, all owed their existence to her existence. That made me think of Amida Buddha. And so I wanted to share, there's a poem by Shinran Shonin. Today you heard Shoshinge chanted, maybe you chanted along. Shoshinge is chanted every morning, for the most part, at Nishihonganji, at our mother temple, Honzan, in Kyoto, and at temples throughout the world, Jodo Shinshu temples. But not just Shoshinge, but also what's called Nembutsu Wasan. Nembutsu is Namo Amida Butsu, and there's a way to kind of sing it. But the wasans are these poems written by Shinran Shonin. Maybe we could call them songs, maybe we could call them hymns. And usually 6 are chanted a day. He wrote hundreds of them. And so they'll chant this 6, and then the next 6, and then the next 6. And it made me think of one of them. This is one of my favorites. Why don't I chant it first in Japanese? And I got my pitch pipe. I'm looking for hyojo, which is E, basically equivalent to R-E. So here we go. Gedatsu no kourin kiwa mo nashi kousoku kamuru mono wa mina umu o hanaru to nobeta mo byōdou kaku ni kimyo se yo. And then that would be followed by a set of Namo Amidambu, this kind of melodic way of saying or singing Nembutsu. Now let me read the translation of this wasam. The liberating wheel of light is without bound. Each person that touches it is taught, is freed from attachments to being and non-being, so take refuge in Amida, the enlightenment of non-discrimination. This comes from the Collected Works of Shinran, this translation. The liberating wheel of light, or maybe we could call it a ring of light. Here's a picture of a Buddha with those, in Christianity it would be called a halo, right? But in Buddhism it's kind of understood as being light. And one maybe behind the head, one behind the body. If we look at here's an image of our statue here in the Naijin and at Buddhist Church of Oakland. And behind the head are these kind of spokes of light in a wheel extending out. And then the one behind the body is more like flames. It almost looks kind of like a boat. It's kind of boat-shaped with these flames. Again, light, this symbol in Buddhism of wisdom. So as you can see with those spokes, those are like light rays. And it's not just where they end in the image. They're without bound. They extend throughout every place. There's no place that they don't extend throughout the 10 directions. That's another name for Amida Buddha. Buddha of light, unhindered, unimpeded throughout the 10 directions. And this light touches people. Maybe not like the physical light of the sun. It's a spiritual thing, right? It's being touched by this light. And so it says each person that touches, it is taught, is freed from attachments to being and non-being. So you may have heard me talk about this before, right? U and mu. This is kind of mula madhyamaka karika, emptiness, the extremes of being and non-being, or existence and non-existence. I'm not going to go into too much detail now. This is actually the second time I'm recording this talk because the first one was too long because I went into too much detail. But basically, middle way. There's a middle way between these extremes of existence and non-existence, right? And we shouldn't attach to one or the other. So take refuge in Amida, the enlightenment of non-discrimination. Right? That Amida Buddha's awakening, his wisdom, is a wisdom of non-discrimination. Byodo kaku. Kaku is awakening. Byodo is equality or non-discrimination. We also say that in the Eko, right? Gan nishiku doku byodo se isai. Byodo, equally, se, give, isai, to all. So this Amida Buddha is Buddha of wisdom of non-discrimination. Amida Buddha accepts all beings as they are. Amida Buddha accepts you as you are. Doesn't say, oh, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not beautiful enough. You're not old enough. You're this or that or whatever, or not this or that or whatever, therefore don't come in. No. Amida Buddha greets everyone. So, to me, this is a principle to live by, even if I can't live up to it, right? That principle of non-discrimination, how hard is it? Why is there so much hate? Why is there racism? Why? Why do we make these distinctions? Partly it's because we're in samsara, we're samsaric beings, we're wired for this. We're always making these discriminations, always making these judgments, right? Going back to like, is this dangerous or not, right? I mean, some distinctions you kind of have to make. Is this food poisonous or not, right? There's some distinctions that we have to make to survive. That's part of being a living being. That's partly why it's so difficult, right? And yet, how about this principle of non-discrimination, principle of equality, right? To me, that's part of wisdom and compassion. Wisdom and compassion as values, right? Wisdom and compassion as principles. So it seems to me to be relevant, I just hear again and again, Buddhism, the way it's taught, is not really relevant to what's going on. To me, it's totally relevant. Here we go again. Discrimination, whether institutionalized, right? Government doing it, people doing it, right? The people I read on the list lived through periods of great discrimination, whether it was during the Yellow Peril, early 20th century, against all Asians, right? Or the internment of people of Japanese descent, of any Japanese descent, purely because of that, with no trial, put in prison, right? Now, why do I have to say that? Why does it have to be that even now, right, that we're getting once again and yet another wave of discrimination? Right? There's also times, though, when people fight against it. And we've seen that with civil rights movement. We saw people doing that even during the internment. Right? I think we can also see that, for example, in the soldiers of the 442nd Combat Regiment, right? 100th Infantry Battalion. I want to get it right. Yeah, 100th Infantry Battalion and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. The reason I'm bringing it up is because they put out a new forever stamp, the Go for Broke Forever stamp. This came out recently, I believe. I think you can get it now, right? And there was an event a couple days ago. But it's, this stamp in tribute of, why don't I read it from the USPS website. With this commemorative stamp issuance, the U.S. Postal Service recognizes the contributions of Japanese American soldiers, some 33,000 altogether, who served in the U.S. Army during World War II. Last weekend, we did our cemetery visitations, although not in person, but, we had a video on our YouTube page of our Memorial Day service, because Memorial Day weekend is when we do our visitations. But we also do an event commemorating veterans, fallen veterans of the 442nd MIS, actually for all veterans of foreign wars. We do it on Armed Forces Day, which is, I think, the week previous. But it's really kind of a Memorial Day celebration or commemoration. Right? And personally, I'm anti-war. I wish we didn't have war, but I also understand that they happen. I don't think wars should be done for profit. I don't think wars should be done for discrimination. But sometimes this war, to me, important aspects of it were against fascism and tyranny. And that's what the 442nd was about, right? I mean, these people were imprisoned without trial, without evidence, purely based on their race, even though they were American citizens, and they still went out and fought, fighting against discrimination. Discrimination is something, again, that we do as living beings, and yet I also, I think humanity has these aspects of aspiring for something bigger, something better. Right? And I think that Buddhism is one place we can find that, in this wisdom of non-discrimination. I think that the people on the list that I read from whatever era, the people who served 442nd and others, Amida Buddha, they want us to be happy. They want a better world for all. And maybe we can appreciate that, right? We can think about the struggles of the people. I keep pointing over here once again, pointing at our book of the Shotsuki Hoyo for this month. But of course, all the members who we honor here at Buddhist Church of Oakland, they're thinking about us, right? They're part now of that wisdom and compassion, wanting us to persevere in this difficult life, living the life the best we can, but often for the sake of others, whether it's our own children, grandchildren, families, but I think often for everyone, right? And I really feel like the ideals of wisdom and compassion, of this enlightenment of non-discrimination that we find in Buddhism is right in line with the best of what America is about, right? America's got a lot that's the worst, but I also think it's got a lot that's the best, right? And those things are liberty and justice for all, non-discrimination, equality, right? That I think that Buddhism is really in accord with. So thank you very much. I know it was maybe it's a kind of a stretch to go from the Neverending story to Amida Buddha to the 442nd, but to me it all fits together. That's how my mind works, I guess. I want to thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to read Shinran Shonin's Wasan poem one more time as we conclude this Dharma message. The liberating wheel of light is without bound. Each person it touches, it is taught, is freed from attachments to being and non-being, so take refuge in Amida, the enlightenment of non-discrimination. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda. Namanda. Okay, thank you very much. Brief announcement. We're hoping to gradually reopen the temple. Please look at the July issue of the Bushin newsletter, which should be out in a couple weeks. You can also probably just look at the website, BuddhistChurchofOakland.org, for updates. We'll announce that when it's coming. It's not going to be right away, but we are going to try and reopen gradually over the summer. And we can't really say what's going to happen in the fall, but ideally, we open up in some way starting in September. So with that as our goal, let's look forward to that. And please, check their website regularly. Sign up for email list if you want to get updates. And thank you very much. Have a wonderful summer. Why don't we conclude the service? Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda.